In the heart of the Wild West, where justice was swift and often brutal, a young woman named Eliza stood on the brink of death. Accused of a crime she did not commit, she was to be hanged at dawn. The townsfolk of Dry Creek gathered around the makeshift gallows, their murmurs crawling through the crowd like snakes in dry grass. Eliza, her wrists bound in rough hemp, her ankles raw from iron shackles, stood at the heart of it all. Her once clean, cream-colored cotton dress now clung to her in tatters, stained with dirt, blood, and spit. Her hair hung loose and filthy, falling over a bruised cheek and a swollen eye that refused to open. She didn't cry anymore. That had stopped hours ago, somewhere between the beatings and the silence. The preacher read from a damp page. Sheriff Rudd stood by with his arms crossed, chewing a matchstick. None of them looked directly at her. Eliza didn't lift her head. Her breath came slow and tired. She wasn't guilty, but in Dry Creek, being poor and unwanted was enough. The rope was draped over the beam, looped with care. The hangman, a drunk, with a cough, tightened the noose, his eyes avoiding hers. The sheriff nodded once and the rope was drawn around her neck. The hangman stepped back and a moment passed. Then a thunderclap of hooves exploded across the still air. Gasps erupted as a black horse charged into the square, kicking dust high as it reared on its back. A man in a long ash-gray duster sat tall, his wide-brimmed hat shadowing a face etched with grit and silence. He pulled a revolver from his side and fired once into the sky. The shot cracked louder than a whip, freezing the entire square. "Get your hands off my wife," he growled. Silence fell over the crowd. "Drop the rope," the man barked, his revolver turning from the sky to the gallows. Sheriff Rudd stepped forward. "Who the hell are you?" The man flipped a paper from his saddle bag and tossed it near the preacher's feet. It flapped open in the dust, a marriage certificate. The hangman hesitated, looked at the sheriff, then stepped back. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the ground with a thud that made the boards tremble. He climbed the steps to the gallows. Eliza didn't look up, even as he touched her arm. "You all right?" he asked quietly. She gave no answer, her knees buckled. He caught her before she fell, scooped her into his arms and turned. A shot rang out behind them, but his revolver was faster. He spun, fired, and the shooter dropped before the echo had even faded. Chaos erupted. He swung onto the horse with Eliza in his arms, kicked the beast hard, and bolted through the square, dust and curses trailing behind him. Bullets tore through the morning air. People screamed. Another gun fired. He ducked low, shielding her body with his, and just like that, the rope swung empty, and Eliza was gone. The sun had barely cleared the horizon when Cain's stallion tore across the open plains, hooves thundering over cracked earth and golden grass. Eliza was slumped against his chest, unconscious, her face ghostly pale, against the grit and blood staining her torn dress. He held her steady with one arm while guiding the reins with the other, his jaw tight, eyes locked on the jagged hills. Far ahead, behind them, the faint but rising roar of pursuit echoed like thunder on the wind. Dry Creek would not let her go easily. Cain reached the split in the trail and made his first move. He stopped the horse briefly, dismounted, and led it through a dry riverbed, walking backward to scatter the hoofprints. Then he doubled back and struck west, dragging a spare pair of boots across the trail behind him to make it seem like they'd headed that way. The sun was climbing now, burning hotter. Eliza stirred once, moaning, but did not wake. By mid-morning, Cain reached a narrow path hidden behind a cluster of scrub trees and sharp stone outcrops. There, nestled in the cleft of the hills, he found a small cave, cool, shadowed, and quiet. He laid Eliza down gently on the packed earth, pulled a canteen from his saddlebag, and trickled a few drops onto her lips. She coughed weakly, then blinked. Her eyes opened wide when she saw him. "Where?" she whispered. "You're safe," he said simply, his voice rough but low. "If I hadn't come, You'd be swinging from that noose by now. That's not justice, that's the law of wolves. Eliza blinked again, dazed. Why did you? Cain didn't answer. He handed her the canteen and turned away to watch the pass below. The question hung between them like smoke. Far in the distance, a cloud of dust rose, a search party. Cain's eyes narrowed. They were moving fast. Too fast. Town dogs, he muttered, and something worse. He reached for his rifle, a battered Winchester with the stock dark from sweat and time. He checked the chamber, slid the bolt back with a practiced flick. Eliza, he said without looking at her, we've got trouble, more than one kind. From behind a ridge to the north, a second group emerged. Black coats, black horses, not townsfolk, bounty hunters. He recognized one of them, Mendez, a ruthless tracker out of El Paso who never asked questions, just collected heads. He would not be here by accident. Cain swore under his breath. The men who had paid him to kill Eliza must have heard he let her live. Now they were cleaning up their mistake. With bullets, he turned to Eliza. We have to move, now. She tried to sit up, wincing. I can't, I'm not. You don't need to run, he said. You just need to trust me. Cain led her through a narrow chute of rock that curved behind a ridge, then crouched low behind a high cluster of boulders. From there, they had a view of the pass. He tied his horse to a hidden root, loosened the saddle to make it look abandoned, and then they waited. The wind picked up, blowing grit into their faces. Eliza shivered. Cain settled the rifle across the rocks, adjusted his aim. Stay down, he whispered. Footsteps, hooves, voices. 3 men crested the rise, 2 from the town, 1 from Mendez's crew. Cain let the first step forward. 1 breath. 2. Then he squeezed the trigger. The crack of the Winchester shattered the air. The man dropped like a marionette with strings cut. Panic. The others scattered for cover. Cain's next round dropped the bounty hunter mid-turn, bullet through the chest. The 3rd man fled, boots skidding in panic. Cain did not shoot again. Eliza stared at him, wide-eyed, breathing hard. He lowered the rifle and looked at her. I only fire when I know what I'm aiming at, he said. She said nothing, but in her silence. Something shifted, not fear, not gratitude, but the first trace of understanding. They weren't safe yet, but in Cain's silence and in the bodies cooling below, she saw what kind of man had saved her. Not a hero, not a husband, but someone who never missed. The canyon was narrow, carved by time and wind into a winding scar of red stone and silence. By the time Cain found the small shelter wedged between 2 sloping cliffs, the sun had dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of copper and blood. He dismounted without a word, lifted Eliza from the saddle, still weakened, still weary, and carried her toward the rocky alcove where the wind couldn't reach. He set her down gently on a patch of packed dirt, handed her a blanket, and then turned to build a fire. Sparks lit up from flint and steel, catching on dry mesquite and pine shavings. The flames rose slow but steady. Eliza didn't speak for a long time. She sat with her knees drawn up to her chest, eyes lost in the dance of the fire. Her throat was raw, her muscles sore from days of fear and rope and running, but her mind was sharper than ever, watching, waiting. Cain sat across from her, the fire between them. He cleaned his rifle with methodical precision, every motion deliberate, quiet, practiced. The shadows shifted on his face, hiding his eyes, revealing the scar that ran down his neck like a crack in armor. Finally, Eliza found her voice. You never answered, she said. Why did you save me? He didn't look up. I did. That's not an answer. Cain paused, then glanced at her. The firelight flickered in his eyes. Because you didn't cry. She frowned. What? When they dragged, you through that crowd, tied your hands, pulled the rope tight. You didn't beg. You didn't scream. You didn't cry. He leaned back, arms resting on his knees. Only the innocent do that. The ones who know the truth won't change anything. The guilty always make noise. Eliza turned back to the flames, unsure if she felt seen or accused. "I didn't cry because I knew no one would listen," she whispered. "Exactly," Kane said. "That's how I knew." The silence returned, thicker now. She shifted. "You know more than you should about me. You knew my mother died of fever. You knew about the burn on my left hand, that I worked in Riverbend." "I watched you for 12 days, Kane interrupted, quiet but steady, "before the hanging." Her blood turned cold. "I was hired to kill you," he said. "Clean job, one shot, done." Eliza's breath caught. "But I didn't. I couldn't." He looked at her now, really looked. "Because I saw how you lived. I saw the lies. I saw you give your food to a starving boy, take a beating for defending another girl. I saw the fear in your boss's eyes, not yours." She didn't speak, couldn't. "You were meant to die for someone else's crime," he finished. That night, she didn't sleep. Kane lay near the fire, eyes closed but ears alert. Eliza lay awake, heart pounding. She watched the shadows creep across the canyon walls. The truth in his voice lingered, louder than any gunshot. Somewhere in the dark before dawn, she rose, gathered her things, moved silently. She reached for her torn, blister-worn boots and stopped. Next to them sat a brand-new pair, soft leather, her size, and atop them a folded scrap of paper. "If you run, at least do it comfortably." She stared at it, her fingers trembling. Her eyes drifted to Kane, still lying by the fire, unmoving. Had he known she would try, or had he just accepted that she might? She sank to her knees beside the boots, but she didn't put them on. Instead, she sat in silence. When the fire hissed, low and dawn kissed the canyon walls with gold, she stood and walked to him, sat across from him again. Kane opened his eyes. She met his gaze. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. He gave the faintest nod. "Didn't think you would." They said nothing else, but something shifted quietly like dust catching firelight. Trust, not built but recognized, and maybe, just maybe, beginning. The canyon had grown quieter over the days. The sky, once blistering, now softened into a pale blue. The wind blew low through the brush like an old whisper. Kane had gone to hunt rabbits just before dusk, leaving Eliza with the fire and a pot of simmering beans. She moved slowly as she cleaned their meager belongings, canteens, plates, the edge of a torn blanket. When she reached Kane's coat, slung carelessly over a rock, she folded it with the intention of packing it beside her own. That was when something fell from the inner pocket. She froze. It was a small, yellowed slip of paper, creased, stained at the corners. Her name stared up. At her in faded ink, Eliza M. 500 clean paid. Her stomach dropped. Hands trembling, she opened the folded page fully. The message was blunt, cold. No flourish, no justification. Just a job, a target, a price. She barely heard the rustling behind her. Kane stepped through the brush. A rabbit, slung over one shoulder. His eyes met hers instantly. He saw the paper and didn't flinch. She didn't say anything, just held it out. Kane dropped the rabbit by the fire and approached slowly, took the paper from her hand, folded it again without a word. "You were hired to kill me," she said, her voice low. "Even." "Yes," he replied. "For $500, he nodded. "How many others?" she asked. 21, he answered without pause. "You would have been 22. Eliza felt her knees weaken, but she didn't sit. She refused. She stared at him. The man who had pulled her from a noose, who had fed her, protected her, made fire when her hands shook too hard to strike the flint. "You watched me for 2 weeks, she said. "All that time. I was trying to decide." He interrupted. "Decide what?" Her voice cracked. Kane looked her square in the eye. If you were someone who deserved to die. He inhaled slowly. And you weren't. Eliza looked away, eyes wet now, not from fear, but from the betrayal of a strange kind. She had known the world was cruel, but not so precise, not so methodical. Kane moved to his saddlebag, pulled the revolver from its holster without ceremony. He stepped forward and placed it gently on the rock between them. If you want this to end, he said, you can end it. Eliza's breath caught. Her eyes flicked to the weapon. Her fingers didn't move. Kane stood still, arms loose at his sides, unarmed. I won't run. I won't stop you. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Eliza took a slow step forward. Her hand reached out. She didn't touch the gun. She picked up the paper, tore it clean down the center. Kane didn't move. She tore it again and again, until all that was left were useless pieces fluttering into the dirt like snow. She looked up at him, her voice hoarse. You didn't run. You didn't lie. You didn't shoot. Kane gave the faintest nod. She dropped the last shred of paper into the fire. You saved me, Kane. Now you better be damn sure you keep doing it. He looked at her, that same unreadable storm in his eyes. I plan to, he said, if you'll let me. Eliza didn't smile, but something settled in her chest. Not trust, not yet, but the ashes of something that could be. The desert sprawled endlessly ahead of them, rippling waves of heat, rising off golden sand and fractured stone. Days blurred into nights. Wind burned their skin, and the sun boiled every breath. Yet they kept moving. Kane leading, steady on horseback, Eliza behind, learning every step not just how to survive, but how to see the land the way he did, like a map carved into memory. She had never thought herself capable of crossing such brutal emptiness. But with him, she didn't just endure it. She changed within it. Kane taught her how to aim. It began with tin cans and rabbit skulls balanced on stones. Her hands shook at first, flinching every time the revolver kicked. But he was patient, showing her how to breathe, how to feel the weight, how to wait for stillness before squeezing the trigger. He never raised his voice, never pushed too hard, only stood behind her, hand over hers, his voice low. Do not shoot. To scare, he said. You shoot to stop, and if you miss, then you breathe again and shoot again. One night, under a sky scattered with stars and silence, she asked him about before. What were you like before all this? Kane poked the fire with a branch. The flames danced and cracked. I was a soldier first, he said. Then a bounty hunter. Then nothing. Why nothing? He stared into the flames for a long moment. Because killing is easy. Living after it, that's the hard part. Eliza looked at him then, not just the man with the rifle or the one who carried her out of Dry Creek. She saw the weight on his back, the years pressed into the creases at his eyes, the nights he didn't sleep. I don't think you're nothing, she said quietly. He didn't answer, but something in his shoulders relaxed. They were nearing the edge of the wastelands when it happened. The ambush came quick, no warning, just the crack of a rifle, then the echo. Kane jerked back in the saddle, blood blooming across his left shoulder. He hit the sand hard, groaning, hands scrambling for his gun. Eliza froze. A man stepped from behind a cluster of rocks, revolver raised, scarred face, black vest, one of Mendez, no doubt. Drop it, the man barked, aiming at Kane's chest. This time you stay down. Kane lifted his revolver with his good hand, but he was too slow. Eliza moved. She didn't think, didn't speak. She aimed and fired. The gun kicked in her hand, louder than thunder. The man's body jerked as the bullet hit center mass. He staggered, eyes wide with disbelief, then collapsed, his weapon slipping into the sand beside him. Silence followed. Total, awful silence. Cain rolled to his side, clutching his shoulder, breathing hard. Eliza stood still, the revolver still raised, arms locked, mouth trembling. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her hands didn't drop. Cain looked at her. "You all right?" he asked, through clenched teeth. She nodded once, shaky, then slowly lowered the gun. Her knees gave way, and she knelt beside him. His blood soaked through the fabric. She pressed her hand to the wound. "I didn't think," she whispered. "You did just fine," he said, grimacing. "I shot him." "Yes, you did. I didn't want to. I know, but you would again if it meant I lived." Cain looked at her, not with pride, not with fear, but something deeper, gratitude. He reached up, touched her cheek with his uninjured hand. "You saved my life." She shook her head. "You saved mine first." For the first time since they met, Eliza leaned in and rested her forehead against his. No more running, no more doubt. The desert wind howled past them, wild and sharp, but their hearts, for the first time, stood still together. The sky turned the color of bruised steel as dusk fell over the abandoned mining valley. Jagged hills surrounded them like broken teeth, silent but watchful. Cain slumped against Eliza on horseback, his shoulder bleeding through a bandage soaked twice over. His skin burned under her fingers, too hot, too pale. She guided the horse, slowly toward the entrance of the mine. The timbers were half-rotted, the rails snapped and buried under sand. A crooked sign still hung by a rusted chain, Durham No. 7. It had been dead for years, forgotten, empty. Perfect. Eliza dismounted first, helped him down. He staggered, nearly collapsed, but she caught him. "You're going to rest now," she said, firmly. "No more moving." Cain didn't argue. He hadn't said a word since she'd shot the bounty hunter. His breath came in short gasps. The color was gone from his lips. Inside, the mine was cooler, darker. The stalks of old coal and damp rock clung to the air. She found a wooden platform left behind by miners and laid him down, covering him with their last blanket. She lit a small lantern, kept it low. Shadows danced across the walls like ghosts of men who had never made it out. He tried to sit up. "We can't stay here too long." "I know," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "But you're bleeding out. I have to stitch it again." Cain gritted his teeth. As she worked, threading the needle with shaking hands, she forced herself not to cry. He didn't flinch when the needle pierced his skin, didn't speak, just stared at the ceiling as if he could outlast the pain by ignoring it. Outside, the wind had changed. They were being hunted again. Eliza checked the rifle, loaded every bullet. She had left. Then she saw it, crates shoved in a far corner, half covered in dust and torn tarps. Dynamite, old, cracked, but still viable. She moved like instinct, quiet and fast. She laid out a string of charges along the lower shaft, connected them to a fuse line, then pulled a loose coil of fuse up to the entrance. She left one path open, just wide enough for 2 men to enter single file. Cain's voice was weak behind her. "What are you doing?" "They'll come in," she said. "They always do." Eliza turned to him. "You said I needed to learn how to shoot. You never said I couldn't learn how to fight." Cain tried to argue, but the words wouldn't come. His eyes fluttered closed. She kissed his forehead gently. "You stay with me, no matter what." An hour passed. Then hooves, boots, voices. She heard them before she saw them, at least 4, maybe 5. They crept down the path like wolves in. The dark guns raised, flashlights slicing shadows into pieces. Eliza crouched by the entrance, waiting, fuse in hand. "Where is he?" someone barked. "They've got to be down here." Another voice said, "Cain's too hurt to run far. Leave the girl. The man's the contract." Eliza's eyes narrowed. Her hand didn't shake. She let the first 2 men pass into the main shaft. The moment their feet hit the inner track, she struck the match. The fuse hissed, 1 second, 2, boom. The mine roared like the mouth of hell opening. The blast shook the stone, sent fire and rock and smoke screaming through the shaft. Screams echoed once, then nothing, just silence and the slow collapse of timber and dust. Eliza ran back, coughing, eyes burning. Kane hadn't moved. She dropped to her knees, shaking his shoulder. "Kane! Kane! Wake up! Please!" His skin was colder, his breath shallow. "Don't you dare," she whispered. "Don't you leave me. You don't get to choose for both of us." She laid her body against his, held him close, trembling. "I will not let you die," she said, tears hot on her cheeks. "Not while I'm still breathing. Not while I still have hands to hold you." His eyes fluttered, barely open. "You okay?" She laughed through a sob. "You idiot!" Kane gave the ghost of a smile. "Told you not to stay. And I told you I'd choose." She kissed him, salty, fast, desperate. "Stay with me, Kane. Please, just stay." His fingers brushed hers weakly. "I'm not going anywhere." They lay together on the cold stone, hearts hammering, the mine behind them, sealed by fire and fury. She had chosen, and this time, it was not to run. It was to fight for him because, for the first time in her life, someone had fought for her. Kane awoke to stillness, the kind of stillness that came after fire, after pain, after the world had collapsed, and only the dust remembered how to breathe. His eyes opened slowly, blinking against the soft morning light, filtering through the slats of the mine's collapsed entrance. The air was cool now, not sharp, but quiet, like the earth itself had exhaled and gone still. Somewhere outside, a bird called once, sharp and clear, then fell silent again, as if even the wind dared not disturb what had been decided in blood the night before. He shifted, or tried to. The motion pulled at his shoulder like something inside him had been broken, hollowed out, and left to smolder. The pain was there, deep and slow, but it no longer burned with urgency. Just a reminder, just a ghost. And then he saw her. Eliza sat beside him, knees drawn to her chest, back resting against the stone wall. Her head had slumped sideways in sleep at some point, but her grip on his hand never loosened. Both her hands wrapped around his like they were anchoring him to the living. Her face was smudged with ash. A smear of blood dried near her temple, but her expression when she stirred awake and saw him watching held no fear. "Only fire," she murmured, her voice hoarse and soft. "You're awake," she said. Her voice cracked with relief. He tried to respond, but his throat was dry, his tongue thick as dust. He swallowed slowly and rasped out, "I told you I'm not going anywhere." She let out a shaky breath, half laugh, half sob. It hitched in her chest and didn't need words to explain itself. They sat in silence for a long time, wrapped in the cave's quiet and the gentle echo of a life not taken. Then softly she asked, "If there's no one left to pay you to kill, if there's no debt, no contract, no target, then who are you, Kane?" He blinked slowly, as if the question were an arrow shot deep and true. He looked past her, into the rising light. Then after a pause long enough to mean something, he said, "I'm the last man you trust." Eliza didn't move, didn't flinch. She just looked at him like she already knew and needed only to hear it aloud. Her thumb brushed against his palm. Slow, deliberate, her voice dropped into something only meant for him, and this time she whispered, "I'm the one who chooses." Kane looked at her fully then, the streaks of soot across her cheeks, the dirt under her nails, the wild, fierce steadiness in her eyes. She was not a damsel, not a victim, not a woman who needed saving anymore. She had saved him. He didn't deserve that, didn't ask for it, but he would not refuse it. His fingers, weak but warm, curled around hers. "I won't let you regret it," he said. "I already don't," she replied. No apologies, no begging for forgiveness, no need, just the hollowed-out mine behind them, the trail ahead still uncertain, and between it all, a fragile, fierce, undeniable truth. She had chosen him, and he had chosen to stay. The border town of Loreto was the kind of place where names faded like worn denim and stories drifted faster than the wind across sun-bleached roofs. It was a town built on second chances, the kind where the past was rarely mentioned out loud and scars were just part of a man's handshake. Dust clung to boots, no matter how many times they were wiped clean. The sunlight turned every porch into gold and every shadow into a place where things could stay hidden. Trouble usually arrived quiet, masked behind whiskey smiles or the hollow sound of an empty saddle returning, and folks knew to keep their heads down when it did. But not here, not anymore. Not at the edge of town, where a small adobe cafe stood beneath the leaning branches of a crooked mesquite. Above its swinging doors hung a hand-painted sign, the letters faded but proud. Eliza's. No one asked who Eliza was. No one needed to. Kane hammered in the last nail on the left shutter as the sun began to warm the porch boards. His sleeves were rolled, revealing the faded line of a bullet scar along his forearm. Inside, the scent of coffee drifted out with the breeze, strong, bitter, grounding. Eliza moved behind the counter with ease, apron tied tight around her waist, a streak of flour across one cheek. She hummed as she served tarts to the two ranch hands, who came every Thursday morning with silver in one hand and ghost stories in the other. Their lives had shrunk to something simple, something soft, shared in half-smiles, silent glances, and the quiet rhythm of people who didn't need words to mean everything. It was enough until the door creaked open. A man stepped through, tall, dust-stained coat dragging the wind behind him. His boots struck the floorboards like warnings. He didn't smile, didn't blink, just scanned the room with eyes like cold iron. Then he saw Kane. "You him?" the man asked, voice cracked with miles. Kane didn't move. The stranger continued, "Bounty hunter from Elhorn Ridge." The cafe went quiet. Coffee stopped mid-pour. Forks hovered above plates. Eliza stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't reach for anything. She just looked at him. "No," she said. "That man doesn't live here anymore." The stranger raised a brow. "He used to kill on command," Eliza continued. "Used to belong to whoever paid the most, but not anymore. Now he belongs to no one except me."